what you were just saying about money and redistribution of how money works is a very interesting topic, a juicy one, a much debated one for many years. And so I'm going to pause that one for a second and then come back, though, because we are in such a juicy time right now on the earth, right? And like we're right in Hollywood, right at the center of the Me Too stuff, or pardon me if my languaging is not great around it, but so much of what has been repressed, held back, that has been completely inappropriate, been criminal, and horrendous, is emerging, coming to the light here. And as this is happening, what is, taking it back to the micro for, say, a woman who's watching this, or a man who wants to be of support to his woman in this way. We talk about that languaging later too. What does that mean in terms of the empowerment for her with her hormones?
Yeah, so in terms of looking at the hormones, what I've done in the book is I've looked at just the key hormones, and I think hormones are, because like we were saying, it's such a new thing, I think it's maybe a bit like vitamins were 100 years ago, is that we're only really addressing the tip of the iceberg of it, and there's going to be more information coming out about how they interrelate and different hormones that we don't know about yet. And I feel like the information that we have is really still quite sparse. But what I do in the book is I address women's hormonal needs and how much they differ from men's, and then so this is the kind of thesis, is that I feel like so much of the time women internalize things, and because they can't match this set of demands that the society places on us, we internalize that and we see it somehow as our fault. We see it as we're not good enough, we're lacking, we have to try harder, we have to work harder, we have to give more to more people. And especially when you're a strong woman, which I know if people are listening to this, they're obviously, they do hold themselves in high esteem, they are working to in the self-love and self-care practice. But I think that's just as dangerous a scenario, because so many women that view themselves as strong then take that as a signal to overgive, to do too much, to be too much to too many people, and are burning themselves out like that. So it's looking at really things like the difference between oxytocin and testosterone, the difference between men's and women's serotonin levels, how adrenaline and cortisol affect our estrogen levels, these kind of like dynamic things. And that's one of the things that's interesting about hormones, and also kind of hard to get your head around, is you can't really look at them individually because they all work in interrelationship. So when I first started studying it, I wanted to create like a checklist of be like, this one does this one does this, but I couldn't really get to that point because they're so interlinked with how they're moving at such fast speeds around the body. It's like a domino effect. As soon as you set off one, you're setting off another, or you're reducing the levels of another. So you really kind of have to look at them as a whole. But yeah, just kind of examining as women how our hormonal needs differ from men, and then how we can go about ourselves getting those needs met in order to make ourselves more vibrant.
Yeah, okay, cool. Great. Well, let's take a step back, because we are talking about something that everybody knows. We have hormones. We all know that we've got an endocrine system. And let's break it down a little bit more simply. What the hell are you talking about? What is that?
It's a really good question. So hormones, basically, I see them as the mind-body connection. So hormones are biochemical messengers that are released in the body by the response to an external stimulus that the mind perceives. So it's how the mind and the body connect. So if a tiger came to us now, we would both release a lot of adrenaline. So that's our mind perceiving, okay, there's something external. I need to create a function in my body. I need something to happen in my body in response to that stimulus. So as we said, they're really, really microscopic. They move around the body really, really fast, and they're really hard to measure.
Awesome. Okay. And let's take a step back, because you said something in there that I think is super important, and it's worth reiterating to make sure that everybody gets this. And it reminds me of, I'm sure you know, what's his name? Biology of Belief.
Bruce Lipton.
Bruce Lipton, right? And that book was so groundbreaking and scientifically rebellious, because he said, it's not all predetermined. Our perception of the environment is key.
Yeah.
And you use the same expression in there.
Yeah.
It's our perception of an external stimulus, not the actual thing, right? It's
Yeah.
not necessarily the tiger, it's
Yeah.
our perception
It's how
of
we
it.
frame it. Yeah.
Will you say more about that?
Yeah. So one of the things so all this work's kind of been bubbling up for me for a good few years. But one of the things I've always been really interested in is stress and how you define stress, because stress can be really different for different people. For me, I'm really comfortable doing public speaking. If you ask me to stand in front of a room for 1,000 people, I'm really confident, I'm really happy to do that. But for other people, that would be a really stressful experience. If you ask me to go to a shopping mall on a weekend, that would be hell for me. That would be really stressful. But for other people, that's their idea of heaven. So it's really about how your mind interprets the situation that causes these physiological responses.
Yeah, I'm with you. I gotta tell you, I'm recently back to the U.S. Right, I've been living abroad for like the last 20 years, and I had my first experience about a month ago of going to Walmart, and I'd heard about not Walmart. Is it Walmart?
Walgreens.
No, Costco. Costco.
Okay.
I had my first experience of going to Costco, and I'd heard about it, and it makes sense, and you can get these huge bags of organic blueberries, and they cost 3 cents, and wonderful. And I went in there with my daughter and her friend, 2 10-year-old girls, and I walked in and I was like paralyzed. It was like I felt like I was in the middle of a football stadium and everybody was screaming, and I was like, I had to just like, okay, breathe, do my yoga practice here. So I'm with you, and everybody else seemed to be just rolling with it. They're crashing their carts into each other and moving around and throwing stuff in and bumping into each other. And public speaking, though, of course, is the worst stress for everybody, right? Scientifically known. Was it Seinfeld said, if you're going to a funeral, you're better off to be in the casket than to be giving the eulogy. Right? Okay, so how does that break down, though, for people in terms of it's our perception of the event, but, like I'm with you, and still I have the experience in life oftentimes where I think that something out there is happening and I'm reacting to it. So how can people take that knowledge and change their experience, which I'm guessing is getting us into that will then change what happens hormonally?
Yeah. So I was doing an interview recently and someone asked me the question, is like, are women not in control of their hormones? Like when you're having those kind of, the PMSing, is that not something that you can navigate? And it's a really good question, I think, because I think it comes back to the yogic philosophy, and the yogis would say you're in control of everything. The yogis that kind of bury themselves in the sand for 10 years or fast, or so they've got to that point where they're in control of their physiological responses. So obviously we're not all saints from India, but I think this awareness and this understanding can help us more be aware of the way our mind interprets external signals, and then maybe it's a question of reframing how we perceive those things. And a lot of it comes back to, as you're saying, that the way that women internalize things and put it on themselves rather than identifying, it's the situation here that's causing me stress, and maybe if I change the way I respond to the situation, I can change the situation, rather than going, the situation is not benefiting me and therefore I must be the problem.
Right. And women have the tendency to be labeled as out of control, whether it's related to a menstrual cycle or otherwise, and the whole notion of whether we want to be in control or how much is the right amount of control or beneficial amount of control is an interesting one. And so let's give an example, though. If for a woman who is, say, being criticized by a boss, and we'll say, well, let's make it a male boss, right? And said, the way you're doing that is not right, and it should be done this way. Typically, that would trigger off a set of hormonal reactions. And typically she would hear this, and I'm sort of phrasing this, tell me if this fits for you. She would hear that criticism as, oh, I'm wrong, I'm not doing it right, there's this right way and I'm not it. How could that tape run differently?
Well, I think there's so many ways to answer that. There's so many lifestyle things that we can incorporate, and mindfulness aspects that we can incorporate in our lives that mean that we respond to things differently. I would say that it all comes back to self-love and self-value, and so it's that prioritizing your own happiness over other people's, which to most women is like really foreign to do. So when you learn how to do that, then you stop putting yourself in those kind of situations, and when you do draw those situations to you, it's much easier to recognize them as unhealthy situations and know, well, this doesn't have to be my resonant reality. I can step out of this and alter it somehow. So it's kind of stepping out of that victim role and just really putting self-love and self-care at the heart of everything we do. So when we look at women's hormonal needs, we need a lot more oxytocin. We produce a lot more oxytocin than men. So we have a lot more need for physical contact. We have a lot more need for attention. Oxytocin is a form of intention and bonding. So we do need more attention. So when a woman's labelled as emotional and use that to diminish her, that's really harmful. That's our natural state, is to be more emotional. So a lot of it as well comes down to dealing, I think, with we all store different levels of undealt with emotional trauma. And when you're doing this work, when you're doing holistic work, then a lot of that involves unpacking that, things that we picked up from childhood, patterns of abuse, or, to varying degrees. It's really important that we do the self-development work and we unpack that trauma as we go along. So when you get into a stressful situation, you haven't got all this stress stored up. Because if the woman's doing the work on herself and she enters into a situation where a man's acting in a way that's diminishing to her, she has the self-knowledge and the self-value to stand up to that. But if she's still holding on to the way her father treated her, the way her boss treated her in her last job, the way her partner treats her now, if she's still holding on to all of that stuff, then when he speaks to her, it's not what he's saying in the moment that she's reacting to in an over-emotional way. It's all the men that have ever spoken to her in that way, because she's still storing that information in her body, in her mind, is that somehow she's inferior, somehow she's not good enough. So if she overreacts in that situation, she's not reacting to that particular conversation, she's reacting to all that stored up trauma, because she hasn't been unpacking her programming.
Right. So what you're saying is, guys, when the woman is reacting to you, it's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. Is that what you're saying? I'm kind of joking, but go.
I think that's where the sense that women become over-emotional and overreact to things come from. And if I get upset with my boys, I do then afterwards really try and explain that to them, that the reason they've upset me in this situation is because this whole other upset in my life is coming at them they've triggered something in me, and just to help them see, that when we have deeply stored emotions that we haven't tried to address and rectify and put back into a sense of wholeness and a perspective, then those can be very damaging behaviours, I think.
I'm with you. And I was partially joking, and just to wind that back around though,
I don't think that. I think that's it for the guy who's on the receiving end of that kind of behaviour. I think that's an appropriate response to take, is to realise that actually the heaviness and the seemingly disproportionate amount of emotion that's being poured at them for just making what they thought was a flippant comment is coming from 2,000 years of stored up patriarchy.
Indeed.
So to put it in perspective like that, and to then have more sympathy for it, rather than thinking, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah, and just so we're clear though, guys, it's not helpful to then say, well, hey, it's not me, this is all your old trauma coming up. No go, that does not help. And I'll say in a minute something that does help, and see if we can connect it in hormonally. Let's jump back though to, you were talking a little bit about oxytocin.
Yeah.
And here's how I think of oxytocin. I think of oxytocin as the hormone of childbirth in many ways, right? Because when a woman's pregnant, she produces more oxytocin. During birth, there's like massive rushes of oxytocin. The baby gets a lot of it, and that's, to me, the image of it is the mother and baby gazing at each other, and it's the love and trust and bonding. And men have oxytocin too, and we can all get it. And you mentioned attention, and touch is a big factor with oxytocin. And And I think, tell me if this is true, what you said a minute ago is that women need to have more oxytocin, especially when they're not sufficiently valuing themselves. Is that right?
Yeah, well, if men release too much oxytocin, it stresses them out, and if women release too much testosterone, because obviously we have testosterone as well, but if we release too much testosterone, it stresses us out. So if a woman's trying to be the boss, trying to be the act in the kind of traditional male ways and get a lot done and be really efficient and be, very left brain working, to a degree that's satisfying and fulfilling, and it's wonderful that we are in a time where those options are available to women and we can pursue those roles. But if you take it too far, then a woman starts to feel stressed. There was a study recently, which I keep quoting, so I need to double check where I got it from, but they found that women, I think, could work 27 hours a week before they started feeling stressed, and men could work 45, because men just have a natural, more inbuilt aptitude for those kind of tasks, whereas women need more reflective time. They need more time to, because so much of what our role as women is to be space holders, to be caretakers. So it's all the emotional space that we hold for people, and also physical space if you're building a home. All the kind of tasks that come around that. Just the whole level of women's work, which ties back into the money thing that we started with, is that there's a whole level to women's work which is kind of in the mainstream society is not recognised and not valued. So this is why women can spend less time doing the traditional male roles. But yeah, to come back to the oxytocin testosterone, it's a really interesting kind of seesaw. So at the end of the day, the man needs to rebuild his testosterone. He rebuilds his testosterone by going into his cave. So he maybe watches TV or goes on a computer game or watches the game, the football game, the soccer game. But that's how testosterone builds. And I feel like a lot of the issue in the male-female dynamic is that women are not honouring men's rhythms as much as men are not honouring women's rhythms, and it's really important for the man to rebuild his testosterone that he gets his cave time, because if you're knocking on the door of the cave going, "Hi, I'm here," even if you're all looking pretty and you've got a lovely meal, it's no good. He needs to be in his cave, and he needs to do that to rebuild his testosterone. Whereas women, to feel better at the end of the day, we need to rebuild oxytocin, and we do that by caring, we do that by nurturing. So we'll fuss, we'll potter, we'll tidy things up, we'll make food, and we'll get to serotonin in a minute, but we also need to rebuild our serotonin a lot more. We need to talk. So you can see how traditionally the male and female roles, at the end of the day, the man needs to sit behind the newspaper. That's what they did in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the woman needs to fuss around and ask him if he needs his slippers and do all that. So you can see the man looking at the woman going, "Why are you fussing? Just sit down." And the woman looking at the man going, "Why are you sitting down? There's so much to do." And you can get that kind of opposite way of how we need to rebuild. So I think one of the key things for women in terms of the relationship stuff is to look at, because we are in this incredible time for women where we have so many more opportunities than before, so to stop putting so much expectation on the man to get their needs met, to be happy, and understand that he fulfills an important role in her life, but it's not the be all and end all that maybe our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandparents, the way they put they put so much expectation on the man to be able to fulfill all these roles in his life. So understanding that in terms of oxytocin, it's really, and serotonin, it's really valuable to be able to go and get those needs met with your girlfriends, in other ways, and then be able to come back to him in a whole and full and feeling great about yourself state, rather than expecting him to be able to give you something which is not in a position to give you. And if you don't understand for yourself how to give it to yourself, how can he understand that you need it? Because if you're not giving it to yourself, he can't reflect that back to you.
Yeah, well put. Exciting. You said a few things there. One, I want to clarify and make sure this is really obvious so that we're not, I want to make sure people are hearing this in the way we're intending it. And I'll come to that in a second. The other, though, is that I think you hit on one of to me, what's also exciting about the time we're in now, right? I've talked about this before in terms of the astrology of the time. And we're in what I would call the 60s version too. And I won't go into the astro details around that, but the 60s was such a big time of revolution and social change, and we saw all kinds of minorities getting big progress in their societal valuing, right? And that's where the feminism movement, or some aspects of it, took a really big jump,
Yeah.
right? And women's lib came out of that time. And we're in another time like that right now. We can see it all around the world where there's major change, certain structures are breaking down, and certain minority groups are having big advances,
Yeah.
right? And part of why I think this is an exceptionally interesting time is in the 60s, when the feminism movement launched, there was this message of like, hey, you know what, women have been pushed down and treated unfairly, and women are of equal value, and somehow that translated often to we're the same,
Yes.
right? And part of what that created was the misunderstanding you're
Yeah.
talking about in terms of our different rhythms,
Uh-huh.
and also, you know, women trying to be men and men trying to be women, which is so unnatural to us. And let's step back too. You talked about this a little bit in the beginning, that what we're talking about in some ways is the masculine and the feminine rather than men and women,
Yeah.
right? Because there can be men who have a feminine core, and there can be women who have a masculine core. And so for a woman with a masculine core, acting in a more testosterone-driven way would be fulfilling for her, right? And same for a man with a feminine core, you know, acting with more oxytocin in a more traditional womanly role will be fulfilling. So anybody can be in either of those roles, and we all will switch back and forth, right? You know, I know that my core is masculine, and there are plenty of times when it's better for me to be in a feminine moment, to receive, to follow. Is this making sense?
100%, yeah.
Okay, so I want to make that clear, because sometimes when we have a conversation like this, it gets really triggering for people, and they say, well, no, I'm women, that's not true, women can do it, you know. And I want to come back to you for a moment and toss something for the guys here, because you said that if guys release too much oxytocin, will you say that again? What happens?
Yeah, so if men release too much oxytocin, they become stressed. So it's important that they do need to have lower levels of oxytocin in their body and higher levels of testosterone. Men have 20 times more testosterone than women, and testosterone is associated with confidence, and testosterone is directional. So testosterone is going for a goal. That's why I was saying traditionally the roles that we pay more we support more financially are those testosterone driven roles where you're going for a goal, you're going all out for it, and then testosterone is like a lift, so it goes up and then it goes down. So you get your goal, and then you need to go into your cave time. And I was just talking with someone a couple of days ago, and she told me that actually for men they have lots of testosterone cycles throughout the day. I think it was like 5 or 6. So you have a charge at something, and then a fallback and a charge. So men and women both have different hormonal rhythms, but I feel like men's are more constant. We all have a light and a dark. We all have a kind of outgoing side and an incoming side, and we need to, as we were saying, honour and nurture those different rhythms. But for men, it's much more consistent, and it's much more easy for men to kind of look forward into the future and feel how their needs are gonna be, because those rhythms are so constant. Whereas our rhythms are very erratic. They are all around the houses, and it's much harder for a woman to identify how she's going to feel about something next week, and in 2 weeks and 3 weeks, because most women are not paying any attention to their cycles at all. If we went out in the street now and asked all the women in the street what day of their cycle they're on, probably 90% of them might not even know what week of their cycle they're in, let alone what day of their cycle they're in. And yet it does affect your mood and your capacity to absorb information, your capacity to get things done. It does change it greatly. There's a company in the UK who made headlines a couple of years ago because they gave their workers 3 days a month, periods days. So on those 3 days a month, they can take any of those 3 days off in the month that they choose to have time to rest and to regenerate, as long as they make those hours up at a different time of the month. And I think, I'm blessed that I'm an entrepreneur and I work for myself, so I can schedule my life more freely. But for so many women who don't have that luxury, they're being forced to be productive at times of the month when their hearts are not in it. They really need to be more inward. And then, at the other times of the month, we're so more powerful, we're so more outgoing, we're powerful all the time, but we have that kind of outward power and that sociableness and that kind of outward confidence that could be, made benefit of much
Yeah,
more.
we can take advantage of it.
Advantage of
Yeah,
it,
I'm with you. I think it's important we go back to something you said a moment ago, though. Maybe the most important thing of all of this, and you said schedule. And let's just celebrate the United Kingdom for a moment, because that's such a beautiful expression. There's again a lot that I want to come to in what you just said. Men release. I want to make sure that men get this, and then I want to flip over to the counterpart for women on this. How do men release too much oxytocin? I get that it stresses them out, but what would cause that? And how do we prevent it?
Well, in terms of relationship breakdown, I think a lot of the time we don't understand that women need more attention. So women are feeling thirsty for attention, they're feeling starved of attention, and then maybe they're putting pressure on their guy to give him that attention, and actually that he hasn't got it to give. She needs to go out, she needs to find it somewhere else. She needs to concentrate more on her work so she can get attention that way and do something that's her gift to the world. She needs to spend more time with her girlfriend. She needs to get a massage. She needs to take a spa, just something, rather than kind of that kind of nagging would be the negative word to use it, that we kind of maybe associate more with traditional male-female dynamics.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you. And going back for a moment to, I was joking earlier about when a woman is sort of complaining or saying that her man has hurt her in some way, and we were talking about how that she might be responding to actually something from her past in a way. And I said, well, men, you don't want to say, well, it's got nothing to do with me. What does help a lot in that is touch, right? And touch is one of the great producers of oxytocin. And I hear you saying now that one of the challenges for men is women feeling unfulfilled within themselves and trying to get it all from their man. And that can feel like, for the man, a pressure to produce more oxytocin. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's pause that. I want to ask about testosterone for women in a moment, and I'm going to pause to say thank you to Longevity Drops. And there's a great tie-in to what we're talking about, because this product, Longevity Drops, is it's all herbally based, and that's good. With you, I can talk in the normal way. I say herbs rather than herbs. Herbally based with chaga mushrooms and all kinds of very powerful herbs that are tonic herbs. And what tonic herbs mean is that they come into our system, and because it's in this very pure format with the coconut glycerin, they come into our system and immediately go to what we need. And herbal medicine and this specific Longevity Drops tincture is really great because male or female, it's going to be balancing to our hormonal system. And that's where, and we may get into talking about how food and nutrition can help care for our hormonal system. The more we are in tune with our nature, and again, that's the beauty of the tonic herbs, they bring that balance to us, whether we need more testosterone or more oxytocin, whether we need to chill out more or we need more stimulant. So I love the Longevity Drops, and I use them every day. Totally cool. And thank you for sponsoring our show today. And let's flip over, though. So great that the guys can understand a little bit more, like that they're allowed to say, hey, I just need some space, right? Whether it's the newspaper, the game, the TV, the cave, whatever. And great for women to realize, like, you know what? Actually, you want your guy to have that space, because you don't want him to be coming up to you and hanging out with you when he's really like get away from me.
Well, testosterone needs to chase. So you have to, and women need to be attractive. So we need to attract.
Oh, come on, say more about that. This is an important one.
We need to pull back. We need to find our center. We need to do what makes us feel good and be attractive. and then the man can come out, he can chase you, he wants to chase you. If you don't allow him to chase you, he can't produce testosterone. My understanding of chemistry is this oxytocin testosterone balance. So the man needs to feel like he's chasing, and the woman needs to feel like she's getting enough attention, and that is chemistry. When that dynamic between you works, and you're producing oxytocin, you're in love. That's all love is, really. when you break it down, it's oxytocin, and men do produce some oxytocin. So, that's what they've worked out, that's one of the main things, because I don't believe that men are naturally monogamous, and that's one of the things that ties men into monogamy, is the production of oxytocin around their woman. So men do produce oxytocin as well. But yeah, it's a dance between the two kind of hormones, and if those hormones are flourishing and you're getting your hormonal needs met, then you feel exhilarated around that person, you feel joyful around that person. And if you're not getting your hormonal needs met, then you can start to feel maybe exhausted by that person, and maybe resentful from that person. So it's looking at, well, okay, this is down to my hormones, really. How can I meet my hormonal needs? And then if you're getting your hormonal needs met, then you can see clearly, is this the right person for you? And if they're not, then you can just move on. And if they are, then you'll work through it together.
Nice, okay. Well, and you hit on something really important there. I think we were talking a little bit before about the old feminist movement, or the last round of it in some way, creating this, like, we are the same.
Yeah.
And one of the really serious costs of that, in some way, it was progress, right? From the chauvinism that had pre-existed that time, it was progress. And then one of the detriments of it, though, is thinking we're all the same costs us our sense of fulfillment, or love, or polarity, or passion. And it's, I think, one of the great dangers of our current time is this men getting soft and not having drive or ambition or wanting to be in charge, and being afraid of women who have gotten so strong and directorial. And I meet so many in my work. I meet so many women who say, I need to embrace the feminine, and I know it, and but he's not doing it right, and I have to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. And chicken or the egg, who's gonna give way first? So so many women are these days unfulfilled and wanting relationships, and yet attracting men who they don't trust on this level. So what can the women do to, it sounds terrible to say it, but reclaim their femininity, or be able to empower men to actually be masculine?
Yeah, again, I think it's a question you could answer on a lot of levels, but I feel part of the answer is, when I was researching the book, and I was looking at all those dating books with really terrible titles that I had to pray no one saw me reading, like How to Get the Guy. The thing that really struck me was it was all about, and obviously we know that there's not anywhere near as many of those books for men of how to get the guy. It's all the other around, and they were all, even if they were trying to be holistic, even if they were coming from a like a compassionate point of view, they were all about making yourself available for a guy. So it comes back to that the kind of social stigma, I feel, around women being single and being happy about that. So it comes back to the same thing. You do what you always do, what you should always be doing, what makes you happy, and you should always be doing what you love. And if this thing isn't making you happy, if you're not loving this relationship, then just move away from it and go back into your self-care. Do your yoga, go for a hike. Put more into your own creativity. What is it you want to express in the world? Work more on your business, work more at your relationships with your sisters. And the value, I think, and again, this is one of the huge advantages that we have in the time we're in, is the value is that women can be single, and we can be single for long periods of time, and that's actually really healthy. That's a wonderful thing, because women's nature is to attract. So the more we can build in that energy within us, the more we can get strong within us, the more we can attract actually the kind of guy that reflects the self that we are. But when we're always coming at it from this kind of diminished perspective, waiting for him to tell us that we're good enough, that's all he can reflect to us, the fact that we don't feel we're good enough.
Yeah, I'm with you. Where is the balance then with, in one way, this will be oversimplified, but in one way it's easy to be happy on our own. And when we're in relationship, then we have this mirror of other who tends to trigger our past stuff. You know, and this is true for men and women,
Yeah.
masculine or feminine. So I'm curious, when you say for women, if you're not happy in the relationship, and I think we could equally apply this to men, then move away from it and come back into yourself. Where is what about the dangers of like, oh, this is not, I'm not happy here, but it's actually just bringing up my stuff, or I'm being triggered here.
But yeah, that's then for you to explore, isn't it? But I think it's having that, that is, for me, that's really what the essence of the feminine is that surrender, it's that acceptance of everything, it's that knowing everything is, well, this is just spirituality, isn't it? But knowing everything is perfect, everything happens for a reason, everything is meant to be. So just always coming back into that knowledge, and always coming back into that safe place of everything is in divine order. And if you can't see it in the relationship, step away from it. If it's true love, if you're meant to be together, you will come back together, but it shouldn't have to be work. And I think that's the old paradigm, is that we have to kind of struggle in relationships, and we have to put a lot of effort in, and it has to be traumatic somehow. I don't think that's what we need to exist in anymore, because we're in 2018, and I think it needs to always rest in that acceptance of divine order, and just trusting in the unfolding. And if you step away from the wrong guy, the next guy that comes along, he's going to be what you need to learn in that relationship, and he's going to give you the gifts you need. And it's always imperfection. And perfection doesn't mean bliss always, but perfection means what you need for your soul growth and what you came here to experience.
Yeah, okay. Well, I like that. I mean, I certainly have from my childhood the image that love is meant to be struggle and painful and argument. But you're saying that it doesn't. Maybe there's another possibility. Okay. All right. From God's mouth through your lips. And to be fair to the women, we got a little tip in for the men about the overproduction of oxytocin. For women, it's so easy to get in a testosterone cycle, because one reason, at least, is we live in a testosterone-dominated world. It's a masculine world. It's still a patriarchy that rules it. The work world, which is very much about achieving and go and do. The business world is very masculine by nature. And even in our conversation, you said sometimes for women it's healthy to put energy into their work. So knowing that work and the masculine nature of the world we live in can be masculinizing, and I assume can be testosterone producing, what can women do to come back to their femininity and their attractiveness and producing the oxytocin themselves?
Well, you asked really good questions. And always I feel like there's about 10 answers I could give you in those questions. I mean, we could tip it into adaptogens if you want, and I think one of the best adaptogens for women is Shatavari. Shatavari translates as she who has 100 husbands, and whenever I say that in my classes, no one's ever admitted to wanting 100 husbands. I haven't met that lady yet. But it gives you the energy to deal with 100 husbands if that's what you would choose. So it gives you an enormous amount of strength, but in a very feminine way. So I really love Shatavari. I think maca as well is really, really wonderful for women. That would be, if I was in charge, that would be one of the first things I would do, is put a lot of superfoods on the health service, but maca would be one of the first ones, maca for women. So yeah, it's about, if we want to take it into that area, it's about just tuning more into our strength and our power in who we are rather than what we're doing for people. So knowing that really the biggest gift you can give people is in your presence, is in your what you radiate in life. And so doing things that nourish that radiance, doing things that nourish that inner beauty, that inner value, rather than making all your goals external and action-based.
Nice. Okay. What you said reminds me of something else that's quite important, which is, do you know how to satisfy an Amish woman?
Tell us.
2 men a night. Oh, you may not know. Oh no, it's lost on our UK friend. Amish and Mennonite are both
Ah.
specific religions from the U.S. Some relationship
Okay.
between them to Mennonite. Okay, well, hopefully some of you enjoyed that. um, and so practices or activities that nourish a woman's inner radiance
Yeah.
or radiance. I would think of those as things like dancing or listening to music or touch, massage, sleep. But we're not supposed to sleep. This is 2018. No, sleep is and it's making a comeback now, right?
It is
Okay.
in my life.
Well, and yoga, especially the more chilled out types of yoga,
Yeah.
all of them are going to be hormonally helpful in balancing. And I love that you said maca too, which is another one of those amazing foods in that it is a hormonal balancer,
Yeah.
right? So for
Yeah.
men or women,
Yeah.
it'll bring us back to center.
Yeah.
And any other activities or things to do for women? So if a woman's been at work all day and go and meetings and and timing and pick up the kids or whatever it is, what will help them come back?
Yeah, just getting into nature as well. There's such a power. They've created a term for it now, which is a bit superfluous, I think, but it's called ecotherapy, which is the therapeutic effects of being in nature. So, at home in London, I am in a pattern at the moment where I tend to do computer work till most of the day, till I start maybe 10, and I work pretty much straight through until 4, 5, maybe 6 p.m. And I've been doing that for about 6 months and noticing, observing my energy levels, and decided recently, and it's quite recent decision, so I haven't done it a lot because now I'm away, but I made it an intention to try and take a break at lunchtime, and because in London, in the UK at the moment, it's dark, we don't get a lot of sunlight. It actually the sun goes down about 4 p.m, so it's been a lot of the time I don't leave the house until daylight's passed, and even when there is daylight, it's very grey, it's very overcast. So making an intention to go just for a short, there's a really beautiful park really close to where I live, and just go for a short walk at lunchtime, maybe just 20-30 minutes, and then to observe how much my energy shifts through the afternoon and how different I feel at the end of the day just from taking that 20-30 minute break. So this is a really good example of what I was saying about the micro adjustments. When we're aware of the importance of getting our hormonal needs met, it can just be about insisting that you get that meditation practice in, insisting that you get time with your girlfriends once a week or twice a week, insisting that you incorporate these superfoods into your daily regime. It can be very small things that can really have a profound impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suspect we're coming around to the point where we'll bring it to a close in a few moments. What would you like people to know about you and what you're doing, and how can they reach you?
So it's really easy to find me, Kate Magic. Just put it into Google. My website is katemagic.com. If you're in Europe, my website is rawliving.eu. That's my online shop. We ship all over Europe. The Empowered Woman is the name of the ebook, which you can get from Raw Living. So if you just go to Raw Living and put Empowered Woman in the search engine, or I think at this point you can just put in the Empowered Woman Kate Magic into Google and it comes up. And I am travelling a lot, so it's worth having a look at my schedule, see if I happen to be anywhere near you. Mostly I travel around Europe, but just about to see Bali and New Zealand.
Yeah, I love that you are making this leap in terms of your own work, from having such a great background in raw food, which, that's how we met, and that's such an important part of creating a vibrant life is what we put into us and the choices we make. To be taking it further, especially for women, in terms of something that we haven't heard a lot about, making it accessible, that's fantastic.
So, and it's all, everything's in divine order. I actually, as I said, I've been working on the material for quite a lot of years, and then I realised in 2016 that it had to be a book, and I was kind of reluctant to write another book, but it was calling me. So I wrote the bulk of the material in January 2016, and at the time I was writing it, I was looking at it and thinking, is this too radical for people? Is this too much for people? I don't know if they're ready to take this on board. And then just kind of sat with it, and then 2017 I made the decision to just actually finish the book, otherwise it would have just sat there. You know, it's so easy for everyday life to take over. And then the editing process happened in December 2017, so nearly 2 years on from the original kind of main edit of the book. And it was amazing to see in that 2 years just how, oh my god, this is so current, this is what everyone's talking about. And then I was just called to set the release date of the book of the 8th of January. So in the States you do it reversed, and you 1818. I really like my magic numbers, so I was like, okay, 1818. That I woke up on that morning. That was the morning after the Oprah Winfrey speech at the Golden Globes, and all everyone was talking about was it's time, and that was the day my book was coming out. So there's a divine order to things. There's a kind of flow with things. I really love to be able to deliver information that I feel is unique, and I really love to be on the cutting edge of things, and that's what drew me into raw foods in the first place, and that's what's kind of taken me into this material, is trying to kind of sail out on the edges of vibrant living and kind of really find how do we maximize that, because I think, you know, for so many of us, as we said, we can be eating our superfoods, we can be doing our yoga, but there's still something missing. There's still a piece where we're getting burnt out, where we're feeling dissatisfied. And I think when we understand our hormones better, we can put that missing piece of the puzzle in place and go, okay, this is one step closer to really achieving that joy and that fulfillment in life that we're all looking for.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, one of the ways I like to look at the word magic and the meaning of it is, magic is really about knowing some things or some principles or laws of the universe that most people don't know about. And so from the outside it looks like magic, like some kind of mysterious thing, but really when you get deeper into it, it's like, well, I've learned how it works. I learned some of these principles, and I feel like that's a lot of what you're teaching us here. Awesome.
Yeah, we're all magic.
And for y'all, if you're interested in connecting more with me, a few options. I've got coaching one-on-one, astrology sessions, Omega teacher training, Omega Institute in upstate New York in May, 26-day yoga teacher training, or the 4-day vibrant life activation. And part of why I offer those things to people is I love discussions like this. I love, you know, we're both obsessed with reading and learning, and it's really great to learn, and it's then when we really feel the impact of it, but then when we put it into practice in our life. And for most of us, it's challenging to do that on our own, and so it's helpful to have a guide. It's helpful to be in the surroundings of people that are like-minded, that are also committed to not just learning the information here, but putting it into practice in our life. So the community and the environment is so important. In any case, I am delighted that y'all have been with us. I trust that it's been as illuminating and fun for you as it has been for me. It's been The Art of Vibrant Living. I'm Daniel Aaron. Thanks to Longevity Drops for sponsoring us, and see you later.
Thank you.
Yay!